Welcome to City Church. We are a biblically based, relationally driven, spirit-led church, encouraging everyone to follow Jesus, grow together, and serve others. We're excited to share this sermon with you today, and you can always find out more about us online at citychurchseville.com.
Welcome this morning, and welcome to those of you who are joining us online, and welcome to my people up in the balcony. My name is Gabe. I'm the congregational care pastor at City Church, and I'm happy to bring the message this morning. Would you stand with me because you've been sitting too long? And we are going to recite the Lord's Prayer this morning. It should be up on the screen behind me. And so we begin by saying this. This then is how you should pray. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth, in Charlottesville, as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Let's take a moment to greet each other, and I'll come back to us. Okay. Well, it's a lovely day today, isn't it? I'm so happy for the cooler weather, and I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt and this thing, and I noticed that a lot of us have dressed for today. And you look all great. So I'm not scared to preach to you this morning. No. We are at the table with Jesus. We're continuing our series on At the Table with Jesus. And today's sermon is called Good Company. And we're going to take our comments out of the familiar story, Luke 19, verses 1 through 10, and the stories about the encounter between Jesus and Zacchaeus. There's a familiar saying that goes something like this. You can tell something about a person by the company they keep. But it's usually said with a tint of negativity, as if to judge someone or to give cautionary advice. Remember, the company you keep tells something about you. And this was the case for Jesus, actually, because he was described as being a friend to tax collectors and sinners. And this judgment extended to the assumption that Jesus endorsed the morals and lifestyles of those so-called sinners. Well, I think of the woman in John chapter 8, who was thrown at the feet of Jesus by some religious leaders who had stones in their hands and ready to stone her, but they really were not concerned about her and her lifestyle as much as they were concerned or focused on entrapping Jesus. They wanted to see which side Jesus was going to be on. So what do we do with our Jesus? And Jesus, if you recall the story, brilliantly responds to them and actually calls them out. And he said to them, remember famously, you without sin, throw the first stone. And they didn't, right? They walked away. They dropped their stones and walked away, probably because they were complicit. Some of them were complicit in this woman's profession. And then Jesus looks at her and asks her, where are your accusers, right? Remember that? And she says, well, they've all gone. And Jesus responds to her, well, I don't accuse you either, but go and sin no more. So the fact that Jesus offers compassion and the fact that we can offer compassion and grace does not necessarily mean that I'm endorsing a person's lifestyle that could be personally destructive to them, right? But some of the folks in the crowd in Jesus' day did not get that. And the challenge for us this morning is really around how we can be like Jesus, be good company. Again, I refer back to that statement. You know, you can tell something about someone by the company they keep. And furthermore, you know, bad company corrupts, right? You've heard that. And that's not untrue. And it's wise to to be considerate of the kind of company you keep. But at the same time, if you are a follower of Jesus, trust Jesus in you, the Spirit in you, to be the good company that can actually produce good results in other people's lives. And this is a challenge before us today. And this is the occasion of the story of Zacchaeus. And I'm going to frame the story in a slightly different way than you're used to, okay? I'm going to take a different angle on Zacchaeus. And you'll hear that as I go throughout. And it's motivated by the research I've done, but I'm also aware that it may be motivated by the very fact that I am short of stature too, as Zacchaeus is noted to be. And in the Sunday school song of the past, some of you know it, Zacchaeus was a wee little man. He was probably a leprechaun. And a wee little man was he, right? And I'm probably standing here in defense of wee little men and trying to ask you to kind of take your eyes off of that aspect of Zacchaeus and move it to a different aspect of him. So, and I've also framed the sermon this morning in 3 movements. Movement number 1, Zacchaeus' condition. Movement number 2, Zacchaeus' call. And movement number 3, Zacchaeus' change. Let's begin. Jesus entered, verses 1 through 4, Jesus entered Jerusalem, coming from Jericho, and was passing through, and there was a man called by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, and he was unable to due to the crowd, because he was short in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree in order to see him, because he was about to pass through that way, Jesus. So Luke does tell us something about Zacchaeus, about his condition, right? He names Zacchaeus' job. Oh, and by the way, Zacchaeus' name is Hebrew, so he is part of the Jewish community. A Jewish man who works for the empire of Rome, collecting taxes and tolls from his own people. And he got wealthy, and yeah, he's short of stature. This stacks the deck against Zacchaeus in the eyes of his community. And they revile him. And they say of him later that he is a notorious sinner. They level this on this man named Zacchaeus. So Luke tells us a little something about him. Now, let me give you a little bit more information about his job. He was a chief tax collector or toll collector. He received tolls because Jericho was a crossroads city. So he was there. He was set up in a very strategic place. And he got wealthy. He did. But most likely he got wealthy just because he was doing his job. And it's true that some tax collectors in the day skimmed or overcharged. Rome didn't care. Rome just said, just give us our part, and if you take more than we're requiring, then well, that's on you. We don't know that that's exactly what Zacchaeus did consistently. He does say later that if I've done this, then I will make restitution. So his job. Zacchaeus came upon his wealth not because the wealth landed on him, not like the rich young ruler in the chapter previously, who comes to Jesus and asks, what can I do to inherit eternal life? He was someone that was wealthy because it was generational wealth. Zacchaeus probably didn't fit that profile. So he was new money, if you will, and assumed to have gotten his money through ill-gotten gain. Luke also tells us that he was short of stature, yes. Now, this actually could mean something other than or more than his height. I can't imagine, and anyone in here who can relate to being short of stature, we call ourselves under tall. I cannot imagine that is a reason why people would crowd him out. And maybe it was, I don't know. I don't think the Jews of the day were very tall anyway, but so it doesn't make sense to me to assume that because he was a short man or under tall man that people didn't like him. Shorter stature could actually have something to do with his youthfulness, his age. He was probably a young man. And this put him at the lower end of the social, economic, or whatever cultural realities. So the deck was stacked against him. He was a tax collector, chief tax collector, because they had people working for him doing all this the same thing. He worked for Rome. He got rich, and he was youthful. He was young. And so when he tried to get a look at Jesus, we are told that the crowd crowded him out. He couldn't see because of the crowd, not because he couldn't see over the crowd, but because the crowd didn't want him to see Jesus. They knew who he was. They didn't like him. They were not going to help him see Jesus. So what does he do? He runs on ahead and he climbs the sycamore tree. So Zacchaeus, we see something about his condition. Someone who experiences the hate, being reviled. I don't know if you've ever experienced getting that feeling from people. But I can't imagine what it's like for him to live that way. Now, one could say, well, he could just quit his job and quit doing what he's doing. That's causing people to hate him. But I don't think Zacchaeus really thought that what he was doing was wrong. And we'll come to that. For now, let's just kind of focus on his condition. And Luke is telling us something here. And he's motivated to see Jesus. So there's a little story. It's somewhat humorous, but it's serious at the end. On the wall of a subway in New York City was an advertising poster that depicted a dignified older gentleman recommending a particular product. Someone, probably a little boy, attempted to deface the advertisement by drawing a balloon coming out of the gentleman's mouth and writing in it the dirtiest thing he could think of. He meant to write, "I like girls." But he made a mistake and wrote, "I like grills," G-R-I-L-S. Someone else had come along later and written with a felt-tipped pen, "It's girls," G-I-R-L-S, not grills. Still, another party had come along and written under that comment, "But what about us grills?" You know, it's a good question. But what about us grills? What about the people like me that are crowded out, that are marginalized? What about us grills? And I think of Zacchaeus as a grill in his community, in his society. Are there people in our lives who are grills, who are curious enough to climb their own sycamore trees to find Jesus? Or maybe that's you. Maybe you are in that tree and hoping to find and see Jesus and meet him and hear him calling you by name like he did Zacchaeus. This gets us now to movement number 2. Zacchaeus' call, verses 5 through 7. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house." And he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. When the people saw this, they all began to complain, saying, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." He was called out of the tree, but Jesus didn't stop by and say, "Oh, hey, you little man, come down and I need to be a guest in your house." Jesus used his name, his Hebrew name, which means pure, clean, and bright. Very different than the way that other people were perceiving Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus' name, pure, clean, and bright. So that when Jesus stopped at that tree, he looked up and said, pure, clean, and bright, come down. I need to be a guest in your home today. This was a call of love and affirmation. And it resulted in a powerful, powerful response. David Brooks, a noted columnist, commentator, and author, wrote about an encounter he had once. He wrote, "A few years ago, I was having a breakfast meeting in a diner in Waco, Texas, with a stern, imposing former teacher named LaRue Dorsey. I wanted to understand her efforts as a community builder because of my work with Weave, an organization I co-founded that addresses social isolation." Brooks goes on, "I was struck by her toughness and I was a bit intimidated. Then a mutual friend named Jimmy Dorrell came into the diner, rushed up to our table, grabbed Mrs. Dorsey by the shoulders and beamed, 'Mrs. Dorsey, you're the best, I love you, I love you.' Brooks says, I've never seen a person's whole aspect transform so suddenly. The disciplinarian face Mrs. Dorsey had put on under my gaze vanished, and a joyous, delighted 9-year-old girl appeared. This is the power of attention," says Brooks. He continues, "Each of us has a characteristic way of showing up in the world. A person who radiates warmth will bring out the glowing sides of the people he meets, while a person who conveys formality can meet the same people and find them stiff and detached. The first point of my story," Brooks says, "is that you should attend to people in the warm way Jimmy does, and less in the reserved way that I used to. But my deeper point is that Jimmy is a pastor. When Jimmy sees a person, any person, he is seeing a creature with infinite value and dignity, made in the image of God. He is seeing someone so important that Jesus was willing to die for that person." The table is the place of this kind of affirmation. It can be, where people can be known and seen, known by their names and seen. And that opens up a way for them to receive God's mercy and God's grace. This brings us to movement number 3. I'm moving along, aren't I? Maybe this is why I call them movements, to keep me going. You're going to have a lot of break time between now and lunch. But Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, half my possession I am giving to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I am giving back 4 times as much." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." Here's where I'm reframing the story of Zacchaeus in a way that departs from the traditional reading and understanding. And it's not without good research and scholarship and self-motivation to defend people short of stature. This is not primarily a story about repentance or conversion. If it were, Luke would have given us some details here. You probably heard me emphasize, as I was reading from the text, a couple of phrases. "Behold, Lord, half my possession I am giving to the poor. And if I've extorted anything from anyone, I am giving back 4 times as much." The tenses in these phrases in Zacchaeus' speech are present tenses, They are not future tenses or conditional tenses. Now, many, if not most of our translations would say, I will give, I will make restitution. But the actual tense in the Greek doesn't say that. It is, I am giving or I give. What does this suggest to us? It suggests to us that Zacchaeus is already doing that. And this makes sense of Jesus' declaration. He is a true son of Abraham. Because he is exceeding the requirements of the law. Leviticus chapter 6, verse 5. When he says, I will make restitution 4 times as much as I took. So Jesus is affirming him already for what he's already doing. Why then is he considered a notorious sinner? Because of his job. They can't get over it. They can't see past that and see that he has been a faithful son of Abraham, in his economic dealings at least. And Jesus affirms him by saying, you are a true son of Abraham. And this was an affront to the people around him. It was, because they thought they were it. How can you name this person who's a notorious sinner as a true son of Abraham? I fear, not just fear, I know that sometimes, and I was just having a conversation with the man behind the camera people, Jonathan Martin, and he fed me this question. I wonder if the church sometimes presents itself as an obstruction to God's grace and compassion. I wonder if we, whether deliberately or inadvertently, are the people in the crowd who are aghast because of what we imagine people's lives to be. And rather than being people who help bring folks like Zacchaeus to Jesus, we obstruct their view of him. We crowd them out. This is a challenge to us to sort of do some serious integration on the way that we judge people unfairly. We don't see Jesus doing that. In fact, we see him affirming Zacchaeus. And it's not that something didn't occur in Zacchaeus' heart. I don't know how one can have an encounter with Jesus and not have something leap within their souls that motivates them to change. But I think that what Zacchaeus experienced here was an affirmation that he was okay. And our challenge today is, I'm going to invite the worship team and the prayer team to be ready to pray for the folks. Our challenge today is that Zacchaeus' story is our story. It really is. Whatever side of the story we are on, some of us here today are, in fact, in that sycamore tree looking to get not just a glimpse of Jesus, but to look upon him in a way that is, there's a longing. I believe Zacchaeus, the fact that he bothered to climb a tree, he was motivated by something more than just curiosity, right? And then when Jesus called him by name to come down out of the tree, pure, clean, and bright, come down. Zacchaeus came down, Luke tells us, with joy. So that tells us something about his motivation to see Jesus. It wasn't just curiosity. And there are people here who want to see and encounter this Jesus in that way. And I want to encourage you to share that with one of us this morning when it comes time after the worship team leads us in some music. And then there's us who have responded to to Jesus, and we have been found by him, and we live into our identity in him, and we live out the fact that he calls us and knows us by our names. And we live in his affirmation. This is a challenge to us then to be good company around the table that Jesus calls us to, and to invite people in our lives to sit around the table so that good company can be the influence. There are boxes. You've heard about these for the last few weeks, and if you haven't gotten one, this is your startup kit for the At the Table with Jesus campaign that we're doing for 4 weeks. So I want to encourage you to pick up one of those boxes, and also continue to stay aware of Alpha and pray for Alpha, because Alpha is a table experience where people who are really truly looking for Jesus can find him, not because of the good food that's served, not even because of the presentations, but because of the people that are keeping company with them around these tables.